I'm Genevieve Christie. I'm the CEO of First Light Festival CIC and a member of the Norfolk and Suffolk Culture Board. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us online today for this briefing. I just want to say right at the top that this briefing is apolitical with an unbiased position and no political parties or interests are represented. We're recording this session and it will be made available later on our website. As the briefing is going on, please do put your questions into our Q&A box and we'll go through those and we'll have them at the question and answer session towards the end of the briefing. And now to give us some background and to outline why these changes are coming towards us, I'm delighted to introduce the independent chair of the Norfolk and Suffolk Culture Board, Louise Jordan Hall.
Thank you, Genevieve. Welcome, colleagues. Pleased to have you here today. As chair of the Culture Board, I'd like to welcome you to the whole briefing session. We have a number of colleagues who are going to be giving you a lot of detail on devolution and local government reorganisation. But I wanted to introduce this session based on the national strategic position. There's not been a major whole-scale reorganisation of local government since 1974. However, there have been a number of boundary changes, mergers, partnerships between neighbouring districts, and some unitary authorities have been set up. The majority of unitary authorities have been urban, although there are some examples of more mixed urban and rural authorities. Devolved government, however, is a relatively recent development. In recent years, there have been devolved powers given to some localities. Some of the devolved powers government have gone to unitaries, but also wider areas covering counties, districts and cities. Devolved powers have been led by a mayoral role, similar to the smaller police commissioner roles, and with wide strategic decision-making powers, unlike traditional civil mayors. Within our region, there are no devolved powers yet, but at local government reorganisation levels, we have seen local district boundary changes and partnering and merging to improve efficiency, better access to services and streamline management. For example, Waveney and Suffolk Coastal District Councils are now joined as East Suffolk. Today you'll hear about the principles and processes of the plans for devolution, as well as for local government review going on within Norfolk and Suffolk. We will not, however, be commenting on any models, as Genevieve has already said. These plans are part of the government agenda to refresh public services, and they also sit alongside the plans for reorganisation in NHS. And in Norfolk and Suffolk, we've already seen the merger of two main commissioning bodies in the NHS, Integrated Care Board. So that sits along what's happening in the rest of the public sector. This shifting landscape provides a unique opportunity for Norfolk and Suffolk Culture Board to advocate for arts and culture and to be at the heart of our future of our region. Your Culture Board colleagues have been working on your behalf and have been working very hard over the last 18 months to ensure that we have a higher profile, not just locally, but regionally and nationally, as a collective voice for our sector in our region. And some of you have been involved in our summit last October, where we were trying to move forward in terms of getting your voice heard at a higher level. Some of this work has been around ensuring that we are part of the economic powerhouse of Norfolk and Suffolk, and that our influence is made amongst that community. We have a strong influence on Norfolk and Suffolk business boards, which will be joining up fairly soon, we think, where businesses from many sectors come together to develop the future growth plans for the region. We are engaged in framing the role of our sector and the role our sector will have in these growth plans, and in where we might see our relationship with the devolved mayoral authority. The Culture Board is committed to the positioning culture as central to delivering sustainable growth, innovation, health and well-being, inclusion, cohesion and environmental responsibility as set out in our manifesto. Our sector is an important part of our overall regional economy and a driver for future growth as a new mayoral authority emerges from Norfolk and Suffolk. It is also vital in areas of strategic prioritisation, ongoing investment, and continued localised service delivery, as we see present local authorities ceasing to exist and a new set of unitary authorities emerging as a result of local government reorganisation. So, we have collectively placed culture and arts and heritage in a good place to take the opportunities that a devolved Norfolk and Suffolk poses. We are now at a point where we are being heard and we are being recognised as a key contributor and influencer in our regional development now and in the future. Our local politicians are keen that the cultural sector remains a major part of all our communities and our economy, and they want to continue the dialogue with us. We are continuing to pursue as well more support directly from Westminster to make a strong case for ensuring that Norfolk and Suffolk is sufficiently resourced to provide cultural services that we need to enhance our communities and their well-being. And more of that later. I hope that the contribution that colleagues are going to make to you now will give you some more detail about where we are and how we might continue to work together to maintain relationships as the landscape changes around us. If we stick together and we keep our champions, I'm sure we will be able to make a success of whatever the future brings. So thank you, and I'll pass back to Genevieve. Genevieve.
Thanks very much, Louise. I think it's great to have that background that you've given and to set the scene for our cultural sector. And now to look at the sort of differences and the synergies between devolution and LGR, as we often call it, as well as Arts Council Review, I'm going to hand over to Owen Calvert-Lyons, who's the Artistic Director at the Theatre Royal, Bury St Edmunds.
Thank you, Genevieve. It is great to be on the call with you all this afternoon. I can see up from the counter there are almost 80 colleagues from across the culture sector on this call, and that's fantastic. I think in all of this that we're going to be talking about, actually our collective power is a really important aspect of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about devolution and local government reform, which is quite complex and complicated, and I think when it gets most complicated is where they overlap. And so what I think is most important to hold on to is that these two things are completely distinct. They have overlaps, but they are entirely distinct processes that are going on at roughly the same time. So let's start with devolution. Devolution is happening all across England, and this is the Labour government's process of passing powers, and the funding goes with those powers that have previously been managed by national government out to each region. And they're doing this by creating mayoral authorities. And in our region, that will mean creating a mayor of Norfolk and Suffolk. We're already quite familiar with mayors in this country. I think there's lots of examples where the mayoral authorities have already been in place for some time. So we might think of places like Greater Manchester with Andy Burnham, West Yorkshire with Tracy Brabin, West Midlands with Andy Street. So there are already lots of these mayoral authorities in place. And Norfolk and Suffolk are part of the next round of priority places, which will also include places like Essex, Sussex, and Hampshire. And the mayor is going to be responsible for these powers that are listed on the screen in front of you. It's important to say these are the current powers of the mayor, of these mayors, but of course they could be extended. The Labour government is very interested in devolving powers, and we may see additional powers being devolved in the future. So as we look through this list, I wonder whether it's maybe worth drawing your eye towards things like adult skills, which will, of course, encompass apprenticeships, or perhaps environment and climate change, such a vital issue for us in the east of England. And perhaps health. We know that increasingly culture is seen as part of public health, certainly in local government terms. And we're also seeing the growth of the culture and health sector working in tandem. So again, that's going to be a really important aspect of the cultural sector in the future, and ways that we might find ourselves working with these new mayoral authorities. The mayor will, of course, be publicly elected, and all of us will have the opportunity to vote this mayor in. So we're going to move on from devolution to local government review. You'll see it written down some places as local government reform, local government review, local government reorganisation. It's all the same thing, and you'll often see the acronym of LGR. So this is the government restructuring the current system of county, district and borough councils into larger unitary authorities. There are currently two proposals in Suffolk. One, you'll see on the left-hand side, there are currently 5 district and borough councils in Suffolk. There is currently a proposal for that to become a single authority, and there's also a proposal for that to become 3 authorities. In Norfolk, where we have currently 7, there are 3 proposals on the table. One is for a single authority, one is for 2 authorities, and one is for 3 authorities. So all of that is still up in the air. That's still sitting with the government to review and make a decision on. But all of these district councils under local government reform would be abolished, and they'd be replaced with something between 1 and 3 councils in each of Norfolk and Suffolk. The government's preference is for all of the new unitary authorities to be responsible for an area with a population of over 500,000. That's their benchmark nationally. That may not be the case here. We're in a much more rural environment. There are 750,000 people in the whole of Suffolk and about 950,000 in Norfolk. So that's much less lower densities than other parts of the country. So the government may not be applying quite the same metric here. So these two things are going on simultaneously, but they are entirely distinct. And if that wasn't complicated enough for us all, alongside all of that is, of course, the Arts Council review, which again is not connected to either of these two things, but it is going on at the same time. That's the review conducted by Margaret Hodge. And its findings are due to be completed soon, but the government hasn't actually made any commitment to whether those will be shared. So we don't know whether all of those findings are going to be made public. Perhaps they will, perhaps we'll get to review all of those. But all these 3 things are all going on all at the same time, which means the next few years are going to be really complex, but some great opportunities in there. Ultimately, the devolution of decision-making away from London and Westminster down here and across to the east has got to be a good thing. Hopefully that's clarified some of the differentiation between these 3 areas, but I'm going to pass back now to Genevieve. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Owen. I think it's really useful to have those distinctions laid out. Please, if you have questions about the authorities, about the devolved powers, pop them in the Q&A box so that we can talk about them in the session at the end. Thinking about what Owen was explaining about the fact that sort of culture and creative industries are not currently on that list that we saw, and any other questions that might be coming to you at the moment. I'm now going to pass over to Megan Vaughan, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Gainsborough's House, and she's going to tell us a bit about what is happening and when.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Genevieve. So I'm going to go through the timeline a little bit of key events, starting, of course, with what has already happened, bring us up to speed a little bit, and then do a little bit more crystal ball gazing about what might happen next. So back in December last year, the government published the English Devolution White Paper. The aims in that were kind of aims that you might be familiar with from our current government, kind of growth, joined up public service delivery, and greater community involvement in politics. And as we've heard from Owen, those things are primarily to be done through creating those mayoral strategic authorities, restructuring our council system into those unitary councils, whatever shape that might form, and devolving more power and therefore more money to regional and local politics. So following public consultation, the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill was then introduced to Parliament July 2024. And alongside that bill, also as we've heard from Owen, that is when the government announced that Norfolk and Suffolk, our two counties working as one strategic area, would be part of that priority programme that was fast tracking us through this system, or the next stages of this system. And that, of course, is when a lot of kind of planning work at a local and regional level really accelerated. So our councils, kind of county councils, borough and district, began to research, consult and design their proposals for their preferred shape of a unitary council. There is obviously information available about the different shapes and different proposals that have gone in, but as an example of some of the considerations for councils at that time, they were obviously thinking about boundary placement, but also services provision. And there are factors like economic, cultural and industrial factors that have influenced how people are thinking about certain parts of our region fitting well together and moving forward as one council area. At a similar time, obviously, potential mayoral candidates, particularly with the kind of major political parties that we would expect to be fielding candidates in a mayoral election, began to kind of quietly get their ducks in a row and think about what their plans might be for becoming our mayoral candidates. And then after the council submitted their interim proposals in the spring, there was a wave of kind of government feedback that followed, and reworked and resubmitted final proposals went from the different councils to central government just last month. So another thing that kind of has happened fairly recently, and we're still kind of gauging the impact of, is that just days before that kind of council submission, kind of proposal submission deadline, Angela Rayner resigned as Deputy Prime Minister. So far, that change doesn't seem to have altered the timeline for this devolution process, either the mayoral side or the local government kind of council side. But it is important to remember that she was spearheading this project. So it's very possible that changes to personnel that are kind of underway at the moment might impact priorities and timelines. Obviously, the Culture Board will be on hand to kind of with their ear to the ground to kind of share that knowledge, and if there are any changes to communicate, we'll use our channels to get that news to everybody in the region. So for now, we're kind of moving on as we expect to. So if we can go to the next slide, that'd be great. And this kind of gets a little bit looser now, obviously, as we're looking into the future. But the government kind of currently suggests that it's going to make a call on the new unitary council plans by March next year. So kind of maybe 6 months away, we might start to get a real sense of what those new kind of boundaries are going to be, what those new unitary council areas will look like. Provided there's no significant disruption, the devolution bill as well is expected to pass in spring 2026. And then in May 2026, so some of these events are coming quite quickly at this point, quite closely together, we'll be at the polls to vote for our new regional mayor. And I guess if there is a key takeaway to really stress from today, it is our encouragement to follow that process, read manifestos, listen out for those campaign promises and use your vote. If you are eligible to vote and not currently registered, there is time to do that. And the Culture Board, as you'll hear from other speakers tonight as well, will be proactively encouraging all mayoral candidates to share their approach to our sector in our region and throw their support behind our activities and workforce. So keep listening out to kind of Culture Board bulletins through the various newsletters, through the website, and you'll be able to keep in touch with some of those changes and some of those announcements. So then a year on, so imagine we have the regional mayor in place, looking forward another year to May 2027, we'll then be at the polls again, this time voting for the transitional kind of shadow cabinet. Sounds a little bit kind of Star Wars, a little bit Harry Potter. But the idea of the transitional shadow council is that system, once the new boundaries are decided, kind of works alongside the sunsetting of our current two-tier system. So there is a strategic and gentle and organised transition from what we have now to what we will have for the longer term. Again, in that voting moment, we encourage you to keep your ear to the ground, listen out for those culture-based campaign promises, and we will be proactively encouraging all the potential councillors this time to kind of throw their support behind our sector. And then finally, from 2028, that old two-tier system is kind of earmarked to dissolve, to drop away completely, to be replaced by the new system kind of running forward into the future. That will be kind of the conclusion of the devolution process, the LGR process that has been laid out in the white paper and now in the bill. And that's where our timeline ends today. Let's see how it all pans out. Over to you again, Genevieve. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Megan. Let's see how it all pans out. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting timeline because things are moving at pace. And as you say, there are quite a lot of things that are unknowns at the moment, but that I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. Now we're just going to move on really to talk about what these changes can mean for our culture sector, and also how we and colleagues can influence things in this period. And to talk about that a bit more, I'm going to introduce Natalie Jode, who is the Executive Director of Creative Arts East. Thank you, Nat.
Thank you, and hello everyone. It's great actually to have seen that laid out so clearly and succinctly. Thank you, colleagues. I just think it's such a critical time. And there is a lot of speculation around how these lines are going to be drawn, how those chips are going to land within the lines, and who gets to call the shot once those sort of plays have landed. You know, how this manifests practically in the end is anybody's guess. And there is a lot of speculation, but the reason I feel that this is so important, this briefing, is because this is a time where the Culture Board partners are able to say, well, this is what we know now. And there are some things that we need to, you know, be aware of and also take advantage of. So what we do know is that this change is real, whether or not the timeline changes, and whether or not it's under the banner of LGR or otherwise. We know that Norfolk and Suffolk are on a fast track to devolution, and we know that local authorities, by hook or by crook, are going to change and evolve in their boundaries. That presents for us some real challenges that I will talk about, but ever the optimist, also the opportunity that we might have. Because we're at the start of that change, and it's always better to be at the start and know what you're asking for. But to look at the challenges, there are many, and depending on what what part of our sector you're working in, what your particular perspective is, they're going to be nuanced. But overall, there are a few sort of themes that people are concerned about. The major one, this hasn't changed, but the major one is that culture is not statutory investment. So no local authority, and indeed, as Owen showed us, the mayoral authorities, when they come into being, there is no requirement for them to invest in culture, no stated requirement. But that's always been the case at local authorities. And so, whilst it makes us incredibly vulnerable at this moment, because of course, this change is a cost-saving exercise, and so we really need to be aware of that. We have, as a sector, managed that really well over decades and decades, and we've done a lot of groundwork in getting us to a point where we can affect some change and take some opportunities. But yes, we are vulnerable, which is why we're holding this briefing. Because of the change, the change in structure and the change in boundaries, there are likely to be changes in relationships. That's in terms of the number of the relationships that we hold with local authorities and decision makers, commissioners. They are likely to reduce. The number of champions are likely to reduce. And those people that we know and who are key advocates for the work of this sector are likely to change. So that gives us pause for thought. Change is messy. Change is incredibly messy and takes a good amount of time to work through. What that means from the outside looking in is that our local authority colleagues, they're going to be doing a lot of navel gazing and internal sort of system considerations. That means there's less capacity for those champions to really attend to what the cultural sector needs. And it also means overall that we run the risk of flying under a radar where we really need not to be under that radar. And then there are some practical complexities. People, organisations that occupy local authority-owned buildings, there are going to be renegotiations there. And those of us who have service level agreements or grant agreements, you know, getting those reinstated in a time of intense change and a lack of capacity internally is going to be really tricky. Personally, for the last year or so, I've been calling for local authorities who have good, meaningful relationships with voluntary sector organisations and freelance workers to move to a multi-year agreement as much as possible to enable those organisations to ride out the storm of change, so that then we're not having to go into annual negotiations with potentially new representatives. So the challenges are many and they're very complicated, but we are prepared because, as Louise said, over the last decade, we've been doing an incredible amount of work as a sector, people on this call and people who aren't here this evening, to really state the value and the power of cultural investment, even in a non-statutory position. We've made ourselves, you know, a non-negotiable must-have. That list of mayoral authority responsibilities that Owen outlined for us, culture sits and skewers each and every one of them. And now is the time really to restate our assets and our value at a time where people are thinking about the structures that they're going to put in place. It's a moment to play the hand that we've been working to for the last decade. That looks like building the case for our economic strength. Perhaps it's about our tourism, our festivals, our presenting houses, and also the vast self-employed workforce that underpins this sector locally. There is a mayoral authority creative health network across the country. We have a really strong creative health offer in Norfolk and Suffolk, providing our mayoral authority with a strategic plan on the get-go that would allow them to link to that network is a real strength and opportunity, and something that is a tangible can-do for us. And, you know, the critical contribution that we're making to education and adult skills, which really, I will say, underpins, is a foundation in all innovation, regardless of which sector you're working in, and is absolutely critical. So the job at hand, really, as you're going to hear from onward speakers, is for us as a sector to work together, to sing from the same playlist, to know what it is that we're asking for, and to ask for it in every single group, every single forum, every single place where we come into contact with the decision makers now and future, and to be clear about what we're asking for. And I think that's what we're trying to do as a culture board, is to really pull together some key asks so that we can land them in with you and for you in all the many and varied places. The one thing is not to assume that it's being handled. So if your mayoral candidates are turning up to your doorstep, ask them about culture. If you're sitting in a room with local authority officers, ask them how culture is being represented in the changing structures as and when they come. Just keep asking the question, because we have to make sure that we're getting those thinkers to think about us.
Great. Thanks so much, Nat. Please do keep your questions coming in to our Q&A box. I mean, that was a really, really interesting, as everybody has been speaking, very interesting, you know, kind of provocation for us, really, I think, in the culture sector about what is going on. I really liked your phrase, Nat, you know, that culture is a non-negotiable must-have. I think, you know, isn't that absolutely the case? And that we do have to restate our value, which of course we all know, but we're going to have to advocate for it. Now we're going to do a little bit of tech we've got coming up. We want to share a few words from our fellow board member, Stephen Crocker, who's been involved with the planning of this session, but sadly As they say at awards ceremonies, Stephen couldn't be with us today, but he has recorded a short video for us on the work that he is doing as part of the Culture Board and also the Norfolk Business Board. And we're going to play that now.
Hi, I'm Stephen Crocker and I'm Chief Executive and Creative Director of Norwich Theatre. I'm also proud to be a member of the Norfolk Suffolk Culture Board, and I'm a member of the Norfolk Business Board. It was on that last role that I just wanted to give an update on the work that I've been doing since I applied and was appointed to that board just over a year ago. It's been fascinating for me to sit alongside colleagues who are leading their own sectors, such as in areas of fintech, agri-tech and renewable energy. Part of my work there is to promote the work of culture, but also get to know and understand these other sectors, because combined, that is what makes up our whole ecology and economy here in Norfolk. I think we're in a really, really strong place as Norfolk Business Board, beginning to work now over the next 6 months with the Suffolk Business Board to create a blueprint for any new mayor coming into Norfolk and Suffolk as to what the sectors that drive our economy want for the future of our economy. I think the progress that we've made, and I've been proud to support this work on behalf of the Culture Board, in really getting all the other sectors to understand the value and the vital role that culture brings to a whole economy, is really important, and that we're making excellent progress there. Over the next 6 months, I'll be pleased to carry on doing this work, advocating for our whole sector across both counties and tied to other strands of work that the Culture Board is leading, which I know you'll hear about on this briefing session. I think we stand in a really strong place as we look to the opportunities that devolution might bring into the future.
Great. Thanks very much, Stephen. I don't know if he was a little bit out of sync, but hopefully you could hear that. As Stephen says, advocating about the value of culture, about what the value of culture will bring to a thriving mayoral authority is so important. And of course, it is one of the key things that the Culture Board is working on. Alongside that, as part of it, I just wanted to let you know that the Culture Board is developing a culture-specific hustings for the mayoral candidates. We're not sure of the detail of that, if there'll be 1 or 2 in our regions, quite when it'll be, but as soon as we do know that detail, we'll let you know. Now, to explain a little bit more in detail about what the Culture Board are doing, I'm very pleased to hand over to Andrew Comben, who is the Chief Executive of Britain Peers Arts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Genevieve, and hi everyone. Great to be here. And I think the first thing I'd like to say is I'm a relative newcomer to the region, as you probably know, and so I'm still learning a lot about how the wider region, both Norfolk and Suffolk, work, what its needs are. But what I'm really impressed by is how collaborative colleagues are right across the region and willing to share intelligence and information. So I've learned a lot from everybody on this call already, and I'm really looking forward to sharing what I glean from this process, but also hearing what others discover as well. And it really is, as we heard from Natalie before, about the way in which we work together now to make sure that we come up with a combined and coherent message that we can be broadcasting and engaging with constantly and consistently with everybody that we meet who is involved in these processes that we've heard about. We really want to advocate for the sector as a whole and for its collective impact and potential, and to do that together. So rather than, it's tempting to think about lobbying for individual organizations, but we really believe, I think, as this team in front of you, of the power of the collective message, which is so much stronger than any single organization can make on its own. And you've heard already a little bit about the work that the Norfolk Suffolk Culture Board have been doing in this regard, and it has been really significant. The messages that have been landed at the All Parliamentary Party Group for East of England, and that was in the presence of the then Culture Minister, Chris Bryant, where these issues of devolution and local government reorganisation were raised and the impact that they would have on the culture sector were raised. We heard from Stephen there about the business boards and the importance of making sure that there is a voice for culture within the business boards. And we've also engaged with the Hodge Review, both collectively and individually. A number of us have had direct meetings with Margaret Hodge, and the Norfolk Suffolk Culture Board had held a collective meeting as well. And Genevieve mentioned that we'll be keen to establish hustings for mayoral candidates and unitary authority candidates to make sure that we hear about and can advocate for the voice of culture in the region. We felt to coordinate all of this properly, we really needed to get some resources together and to establish a working group that could concentrate on it. And so we were able to secure funds from Arts Council England, and we've matched that with a number of in-kind resources from organisations around the region. And we've formed a representative group of around 10 people, trying to balance the geography of the region, the scale of organisation, of different art forms, and also of funding status, those who are funded by Arts Council, not funded, both freelance and employed representatives. And what we aim to do, this group will be chaired by Stephen Crocker, by Owen and myself sharing the chairing, but it really is a collaborative working group that we hope will also be able to distribute the leadership of this messaging across organisations right across the region. But we really want to listen to and collaborate with the cultural sector, but also beyond the sector. We want to stay close to a number of the organisations that can influence and be advocating for the changes that we've heard about. So we'll be staying very close, obviously, to Arts Council England's thinking around devolution and LGR, but also to health sector colleagues and education sector colleagues, as well as the business board, as I mentioned. We'll be building working relationships with mayoral candidates and unitary candidates, and also senior staff, and really wanting to advocate for all of their support for culture. And as Natalie mentioned, we want to establish a summary of cultural assets across Norfolk and Suffolk, so that that's a consistent advocacy toolkit that we all have, that we know exactly what's here and its economic and social impact. And so we will crystallize some of the messages for everybody so that they're easily distilled and also easily communicated. We then want to really develop a clear plan of how the mayoral and unitary authorities can support the development of culture and the cultural sector and its social and economic impact. And within that, create options for a mayoral authority on the structures, the policy and strategy to best support the cultural sector. And I think that's important to underline, that we'll be creating a set of options. We won't be landing one solution, but we want to make sure that we have an adaptable toolkit for everybody to use, whatever outcome of these processes takes place. We'll be seeking manifesto commitments on culture by mayoral candidates and by shadow unitaries. And that then forms part of the hustings process that we've mentioned already, that we'll be seeking those manifesto commitments and asking them to really talk to all of us in the sector about how they best think they can support culture. And then within all of that, this working group will be really relying on the intelligence and information that you can all gather, and we want to be communicating really widely across the sector. We'll be regularly posting resources on the website for the Norfolk Suffolk Culture Board website, so do keep in touch with that. As Megan was saying earlier, really look out for the updates that we'll be posting regularly. But also, if you feel you have particular insight or particular networks that are active and useful for this work, please get in touch, because again, it's about how we have engaged with local politicians, with mayoral candidates, and some of the organisations around the region will have better connections with some people that emerge than others, and it's our collective action and the way that we share that information quickly and efficiently and consistently that will really get the voice of culture for Norfolk and Suffolk across to everybody. So I'm really excited by this work. I think it, weirdly, I'm having flashbacks to COVID with the webinar, that there were moments where the culture sector really came together and spoke with one voice, and where the information was incredibly complicated and changing really quickly. And it feels like that moment is here again, and we have an opportunity to seize it. And I think hopefully the work that we're doing together through this working group will really help articulate our case. Thanks, Genevieve.
So much, Andrew, and thanks to all of our speakers. Well, now we're going to take some questions and have a conversation, really, about what we've been talking about today. We've had a question, a sort of nuts and bolts question, really, to kick us off, which is about where you can actually see proposals for local government reform. Which of course is really important. Not bedside reading, I would say, but to sort of understand these different proposals, and those are published on local authority websites. And we're going to put together some links, and we will share those as well. So that is kind of, to do our kind of research on it. And it is interesting to see what is proposed. Yeah, and the opportunities that lie ahead. I think we've all had it referenced this evening, is this sort of kind of idea, of change coming towards us. And I think, Andrew, when you were mentioning COVID, that was change. We've been in this kind of context of change, and we are here again, aren't we, with this mayoral and LGR situation. And there's kind of, as we've said, there is opportunity, and there's also perhaps destability for us as well, to be thinking about. We've had a question, which is, a very sort of a great question to start with, really, which is, how can who's going to stand as a mayoral candidate at the election? And I wonder, Natalie, you're sort of querying about that. Would you like to sort of pose that question a little bit, and we can tease it out?
Well, yeah, I think I'm not clear about what constitutes, or who constitutes being eligible to stand for mayor. Is it a current councillor? Is it somebody that has had to have been an MP? Can it be a business person? Is it any of those three people? I really have no idea, but what I do know is that it isn't what we think of as a traditional mayor. And so I'm just interested in the profile, really.
Yes, I think that there is, I think there's some sort of basic statutory things. You've got to be 18, you've got to be a citizen of the country. I don't know if anybody else wants to talk about that at all. It's quite interesting, because I think at the moment, sort of civic people, I think someone from a district council is standing as mayor. Police commissioner is standing as mayor. So I think it's a very broad sort of remit, really. But you have to be a British citizen, eligible as a Commonwealth citizen, citizen of the Republic of Ireland. Some sort of basic things like that. You must meet some of that criteria.
I think just
basically anyone who lives here.
Just to jump in there as well, I think there are people from the business communities in our two counties that are being smoked out, showing an interest. I'm not sure I couldn't tell you who they are or what their names are, but I think there's definitely going to be people from the business community who want to take on this role as well.
Great. I'm just trying to.
Can I just add to that as well, Genevieve?
Thank you, Louise. Yes, please come in.
People make an assumption, I think, that it's only the political parties who are putting people forward. They are, of course, going to do that. But as we've said, it can be anybody in the community. So it's really about the individuals, maybe business, as Megan has said, but other people as well. But they obviously need to have backing from people. So it will be an election process. And as citizens of this area, we will be able to vote for people. So, you've got to put yourself forward strongly if you're not political candidates.
And it's quite a short timeline, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about, May 26. So it's not long to go to galvanise support. Owen, would you like to come in there?
Yes, I just wanted to come in there only because I think the word the business community has been mentioned a few times there, and I think it's an important differentiation that Louise makes. This person could absolutely come from the cultural sector, and there are some great examples where they have. Tracy Brabin, who is the mayor of West Yorkshire, was an actor previously, and she's done some extraordinary things in West Yorkshire and really elevated the role of culture. So it could be somebody on this call right now. There could be a colleague here who decides actually they're the one that's going to stand. And if you do, you've got my vote.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a question that's come in as well, which is about, has any research been conducted on the impact of mayoral authorities on the culture sector in other areas of the UK? I wonder if anybody here would like to come in on that. Andrew, would you like to speak about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, as Owen says, there's quite a bit of information on West Yorkshire and also on Manchester, and one of the early tasks of the working group that we've set is to really talk to some of those mayoral authorities and do some research on best practice and models that really have worked well, and where the influence of a mayoral authority has been significant on the cultural voice. So we hope to try and pull some of that information together. It's certainly not in one place at the moment.
Yes, it's interesting. I suppose we sort of look north sometimes, don't we, and think, well, you're right, there's been quite a lot in that sort of area, and some seems very positive, some seems less positive. But I suppose, and I don't know what you think about this, but when you are at the start of something and when you're being fast-tracked like we are, do we think that there is this opportunity that is exciting to shape how our own sort of mayoral Norfolk, Suffolk authority can look at culture, can give us that positive impact that we want? I know you've all touched on that, but would anybody like to sort of come in a little bit more on that? Natalie?
Yeah, I would. We've been talking, colleagues of mine at Creative Arts East and I have been talking to our network across the country of other rural touring organisations, and many of whom are experiencing now for some years mayoral authority changes and unitary. And I think one of the important things to note is that there have been a lot of trip hazards, and the brilliant thing about us going next is that we can try and avoid those trip hazards, I think, and do a lot of that learning from them, take advice and guidance from them. But also, there are real opportunities. I drew attention to the Creative Health Mayoral Authority Creative Health Network, but published online in London, in West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, there are creative health strategies for those mayoral authorities. They're ready, they're up and running, they're going. And that's sort of unseen, unheard of before. So that is a really piece of powerful planning that we can pick up on, and actually they've already done the thinking. We just need to contextualize it into our space.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, isn't it? And I think what Stephen Crocker was saying in his short piece as well about other sectors. So we can talk about health, Owen referenced education, and Stephen talked about agri-tech, fintech. that opportunity in a way, maybe now more than ever, to be able to link the work that we know, the good practice that we know that's been happening around the country that we've been doing in our regions, but also those other sectors that we're going to have to advocate to, but hopefully create great relationships with going forward. That could be a great kind of underpinning for our sector going forward. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on any of that. Maybe not. The other thing I just wanted to pick up on is also the role of trustees and other supporters in our own organisations, and maybe just thinking about our own organisations and individuals in our sector, and how we can sort of, as was said by Andrew, come together now. Again, in a sort of spirit of opportunity, but that really trustees, directors on our boards, if we have them, but also individuals can really mobilise in this area. And that with all the information that is coming out, again, it's a fantastic resource that we have. Andrew, I don't know if you'd like to maybe pick up on that a little bit more, and then maybe Louise.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that that our trustees across all of the organisations that are in the region are a really powerful voice for not only the organisations that they are custodians of, but for culture more widely, and to equip them with consistent and coherent messages that can then be voiced across the region, I think is our task now. So that's why I think we feel coming together with an agreed set of messages and a really crisp and concise set of tools, an advocacy toolkit that everybody can use is so important. I think it probably goes more widely than trustees as well, and that there are advocates and supporters, donors and audiences who will all be our champions if we can give them the right sorts of messages to, and also more importantly than anything, I think really encourage people to engage with this process and put their vote where it counts.
Thank you. Louise, would you like to come in at all on that?
Yes, I mean, just to build on that, Andrew, you said some of the things I was going to say, which is good. And I think to build on that, I mean, we have a huge network of people amongst our trustees, our ambassadors, and don't forget our patrons across this area. Very influential people in lots of different ways, in business and in government and in wider circles, who, if we can give them the right information through the project that Stephen and Andrew and Owen are going to be leading, if we can give them the right information, they are our advocates. They are part of the whole of Norfolk and Suffolk, not just for culture. I think if we can capitalise on those networks and those individual people, it will make a huge difference to where culture sits in the future. The other thing as well, I think, is trying to encourage some of those people who might be interested in mayoral roles. We know a few of the candidates coming forward, and I would say there are a lot of other people as well who have wide experience like they do and wider, who would also be very good as our mayoral candidates. So if we can encourage those people, it would be really, really help everybody think about that across the board. And, I don't mean across the culture board, I mean across the board, everybody who's on this webinar.
Yes, thank you. We've got a question which is really about where the creative industries fit into all of this, which I think is an excellent question that we might want to tease out. We know that the creative industries is included in the industrial strategy going forward. How do we feel that sits in this space? Does anybody want to speak to that? Megan, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, but maybe briefly, but I think I risk being potentially off message with this, in that I think sometimes culture, as we feel we represent it as part of the culture board and kind of the arts and culture, kind of the front line of that particular side of the service and the work that we do, I think can sometimes be a little overshadowed by some of the more commercial, technological side of what is broadly known as the creative industries. People here on this call might disagree with me with that approach. I think that, again, to echo a lot that other people have said, particularly Andrew, we want to be part of that collective voice. It's really important that we are working together strategically with colleagues across all sorts of different areas. But I think what we want to make sure of is that kind of culture in terms of arts, culture, the heritage sector as well, I think is a really big, important part of what we do in this corner of our world. Don't necessarily get swept up in a lot of really exciting stuff that's happening in other parts of the creative industries. But please disagree with me on that. I'm aware you might.
Does anybody else want to come in on that? Andrew?
Well, I think the creative industries message has really landed with government in respect of growth and the growth agenda, and it's a really live issue as to how much the culture sector, as we might understand it, can land the message that we are an important contributor and colleague of the creative industries. So I feel that they are really symbiotic, but I completely understand your concern, Megan, that we might get drowned out. I think it's just important for us to be really clear about the impact, the economic, but also the social impact that the arts and culture sector, as it is, can have, and that we are an important part of and celebrate the contribution of the creative industries more widely.
And I think, with the business boards that we're going to be working with as well, there is obviously that symbiotic relationship that you've been talking about. Louise, do you want to come in there?
Yes, in terms of creative industries, I think some of the discussions that we've had have been around how do we link, how do we support each other in terms of moving forward, and rather than being in competition, actually working together. I don't think the Culture Board is the place for creative industries to sit, but there may be some discussions that we can have with them about how do they network, how do they push their side of things forward in terms of our economy. And we will be picking up some of that work as we go forward, because it's really important economically that we are clear about the differences, but also the symbiotic side of things, as Andrew says, between us and the creative industries. A lot more to do, and I think our colleagues in higher education who sit on the board as well are keen to link up with that, because they have quite a lot of input to creative industries and the media sector. So it's important for us to actually make those linkages and talk together about what's happening in the future.
Absolutely. Another area as well is the freelance community, of course, in our sector. And we do have freelancers on the Culture Board. But of course, we all connect with freelancers all the time. We've been freelancers ourselves, and many of us. And it's important for people who are working in the freelance space to know and understand what's going on in this space. We're very aware of that, and to be able to find the information and be able to engage with it as well. So I hope that you will find resources on our website and also through our networks. I think we're repeating this again. It's really how networked we all are across our cultural sector, that we can share this information. It goes back to what you were saying, Megan. So I think that, the freelance community, I really hope we can all engage through this process, through finding out the relevant information, being advocates, seeing what's going on and being active. We will have resources on our website. I just want to shout out for our website, which is fairly new, but we can now share, much more than we have been able to share before. So that's great. I've got a question here about are we putting together facts and figures? Well, we are, and we will. That is a great part of what we are doing as a culture board, is putting together these resources. So I hope that they will be useful for you. And again, please do look at that, at the website to be able to see what we're doing. I think I don't know if we want to talk any more generally about the sort of the way that we will be sort of going forward. Andrew, you have spoken very eloquently. I don't know if you want to reiterate at all, which might speak again to kind of freelance community as well, about what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's worth just sharing, because I sort of glossed over it, the 10 people who are immediately engaged in the working group. So I mentioned that Stephen and Owen and myself are sharing the chairing. Sorry for the rhyme again. Calvin Winner from Gainsborough's House is part of the group, as is Daniel Bryan from Norfolk and Norwich Festival. Two freelancers then. So to the freelance point, it was really important that we did try and strike a balance across this group. Kath Cockshaw and Julia Devonshire are joining us. Peggy Hughes from the National Centre for Writing, and Jago Cooper from Sainsbury Centre for Visual Art, and Alex Casey from Suffolk Art Link. So those are the 10 initial participants in this working group. But we will be, as I say, really keen to engage much more widely and find ways to distribute some of this load across different organisations and indeed freelancers if they feel they have the capacity and ability to help. So yeah, please stay in touch with the Norfolk Suffolk Culture Board. We'll put the contacts up at the end of this session, and look at the website for the regular updates that we'll be posting.
Thank you, Andrew. Megan.
Yeah, I guess I just want to follow up briefly on kind of the question of involvement of the kind of really crucial freelance sector in our region. And I want to just briefly draw a line back to the kind of the in-person summit gathering that we did last year in Great Yarmouth. Obviously, being in person puts a limit slightly on the number of people that you can get under one roof, but we did have a really strong contingent of our freelance colleagues with us that day. And some of the really key messages that I think the Culture Board took away from that session is how to be more transparent and how to be better at sharing some of the work that we're doing on behalf of the sector in our region. Part of that's really influenced the fact that we're having this conversation today, and the way that the website has evolved so that it can be a platform for kind of resources and information going forward. But I guess I just want to, again, at risk taking us off topic slightly, our colleague Kath Cockshaw, who is a member of the Culture Board, who is now on the working group as well, that Andrew has just talked about, is also leading another research project with freelance community in our region that is kind of embryonic at the moment, but I think we really hope that will provide some really rich and useful resources over the next year or two. The Culture Board, I think I can speak for everybody who's been involved now and in the past to say that we really recognise the role played by the freelance community in the work that we do, and also in our ability to have a really strong voice about the value of what we do for everybody in our region. And we are very open to hearing from everybody about ideas about how we do that better, how we do it more frequently, how we do it less frequently if you're sick of hearing from us. But it is a really important point that we cycle back to in so many of these conversations, and it will be central to the way we go forward with this work.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think you've explained that very well. We've had a question, which is a good one as well, which is about how much influence do we feel is needed to bring the general public along with us on this journey? Seeing the value of the arts and culture at this tricky period. I mean, yes, I think it's general advocacy, isn't it? I would say we're always doing that, aren't we? But I think it probably is important alongside the strategic work that's going on. Does anybody else want to add into that?
Well, yeah,
Andrew?
I mean, I'd say, Genevieve, exactly. we are and should be constantly making the argument as widely as possible. But I suppose what we're saying here tonight is that this is a crystallizing opportunity and also a need to make the argument really strongly. I suppose I've said it already, but the point I keep coming back to is let's try and counter voter apathy and make sure that people understand that the changes are important and significant and do have an impact on the areas of life that people care about. And if one of those areas that they care about is culture, then they really need to get engaged in the process. And even if that's just exercising their democratic right to participate, that is an important part. So I think there's a role for all of our organizations and all of us to play in, and again, when we have the tools that we're putting together to make that case again and again.
Thank you. Louise, would you like to come in there?
Well, I don't think I can add to that. I think it's Andrew said it. I think, I mean, this project where we're trying to advocate much more is going to be called Strive to Thrive. And it's important that those sorts of messages get across to the public. And I think the project will be able to influence and have much more engagement with the public. I mean, we've got our website, we've got our opportunities to sharing all this information through all of our organisations, and so we can influence in that way as well. We need to look at that and look at what our communications and transparency is all about in terms of getting the public much more on board with us as well.
There's something that people might also want to go to and will help with kind of more information about what is going on, and then that can be shared more widely with networks, but also with the general public, which is the Norfolk Arts Forum Conference, which is happening in the middle of November, on the 19th of November. And that's going to have a keynote speaker from a mayoral or combined authority. The booking for that's going to go live this week. So I think, again, the information's coming out now. You know, us doing this and going to that event, there's going to be more information as well on the Norfolk Arts Forum bulletin. So please, whether you're in Suffolk or Norfolk, do log into that and see what's going on. We've had a question which is about, are there other cultural groups lobbying, or are we unique? Well, I think we can say that our collaboration is pretty unique. It feels quite special. It's pre-devolution that the Culture Board has been across, you know, both of our huge counties, which is a benefit. I don't know if anyone would like to sort of add to that. Louise, were you going to say something there?
Yes, I was. I mean, we've had some interesting discussions with the Arts Council, because they are very interested in what we do, because they feel that we are unique. And there are other collaborative and collective organisations around the country, but the way in which we function and the way in which we actually engage, not just with the people around the board, but with our economic partners and business, and also with, as we said earlier, a whole range of people outside of the board. We've had some interest where I think Hertfordshire and Brighton areas are interested in how we work. So we've got some opportunities to share our model. I think our model is different because it is so collaborative. And our model is different because if we do any work, it's not just people who are around the table on the board who do the work. And we're very clear about our working groups, engaging with people who do not sit on the board, and drawing on information from much more wider networks within culture, arts and heritage. So yes, I think we are unique, and we need to keep being unique. And I think this session today is very different from anything that anybody has done before, and is the start of actually doing much more strategic work, which is different for our collaborative.
Andrew, did you want to come in there?
Well, I'd second that, really, that it's a huge strength to be a body that is already echoing the combined authority, and demonstrating how these two regions work together and really come together around some of these critical issues. I also think it is, and we know, as Louise says, from the Arts Council, a model of good practice that is looked to by other areas of the country. And that's something really to hold on to and celebrate. At the same time as not being smug about it, because we don't know everything, and we are only as good as the information that we share together. So I really want people to hear and understand tonight that that this is not about a briefing where we have everything all tied up in a bow and can present it, but it is a way of working that we're sort of suggesting and advocating for. And the more that we can share, the more that we will be powerful and keep at the forefront of that kind of collective action.
Thank you, Andrew. I think that's a very good place for us to close our briefing tonight, to have a galvanizing feeling of energy as we go into this period, to take that collective sort of energy with us, to be informed, to advocate, to share with our networks, with the general public, all of the things that we have been talking about. I really hope that you found this briefing useful. It's the start of this period, so I hope you will engage with us in all the ways that we have been talking about. I'd like to just say a few thanks to our speakers, Louise, Owen, Megan, Stephen, Natalie, Andrew, to our fantastic secretariat from Norfolk and Suffolk, Jane Knight, Nikki Braithwaite, Leanne Goodrum and Laura Cole-Matthews, to Peggy Hughes and her team, Karen and Ellie at the National Centre for Writing for facilitating this webinar and its tech. And thank you all very much for joining us today. So please do keep in touch. Here's our website. Please go on it. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Have a great night.
And can I thank you, Genevieve, as well, for your excellent chairing for today.
Thank you.